Hey everybody, welcome to the Dr. Sonja Sutherland Show. We're glad to have you this Monday morning. It is 10 a.m. and we're following the morning swig. I know y'all had a good time listening in on that. But on this show, of course, we're talking about family wellness, emotional health, mental wellness. And of course, our goal, as always, is to make sure families have the tools they need to help them be as solid as they can in their own personal, emotional, and mental wellness and their family wellness. And today we're talking about how to help children handle difficult emotions. Every child has emotional breakdowns, meltdowns. We've seen them, right? Some, not so bad. Others, like, totally off the charts, right? We'll see them in the supermarket, in a restaurant.
Yes.
You see them all over the place. You look like what is coming to mind right now.
Yes. Goodness.
Right? We see them at church, right?
Mm-hmm.
At home, of course, obviously. And then, of course, we have different parental reactions, right? We have different types of parents who react differently for those meltdowns. We have some parents who will just ignore it and just wait for it to go away. Other parents will completely avoid it. Others will, like, no, I'm in charge, and they will battle with the kid and, overpower them, yell it out. Other parents may talk it out. Right? And so you'll see different levels of success just depending on the child, depending on the parent. But at the end of the day, either we're teaching our children emotional intelligence, how to handle their difficult emotions well, or we're teaching them negative patterns that will cause problems for them later on as they continue to grow. Right? And so we've all seen adults who handle emotions really poorly. Well, those are the children that never learned how to handle their emotions well in grown-up form, right? And so we want to see how do we deal with that? How do we avoid that? How do we help our children gain emotional intelligence, right? So joining us in the studio today is Annika Fairbairn. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. Annika is an associate professional counselor at Legacy Changers Counseling, and she is a specialist in animal-assisted therapy. Did I get that right?
Yes, you did.
We're going to talk about that a little bit later on today as well. But tell us why this topic is important for parents to understand.
It's just really important because it goes beyond your children behaving well today. It's really teaching them how to function as an adult later on.
Mm-hmm.
Because like you said, what we're seeing today when kids are not able to deal with those hard emotions, they're not going to be able to tolerate difficult times when they grow up as an adult. So depending on how you handle those situations today will teach them if they, can just get away with it in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And that might harm them in being able to hold a job, being able to complete college, all those things.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you are solving everything for them today and not letting them go through it, they're going to expect that from the future.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to think that's how the world works.
Yeah.
And everything's going to come to a crushing hold when they actually enter into the real world.
Yeah. So you're right. I like the way you put that you're teaching children how the world works, right? And so what about the parent that says, oh, well, it's not that serious. I mean, it's not going to go all the way to college and work. They're just children. Children behave badly sometimes. Children have tantrums.
Yeah.
It's just... it's what they do. It's not that big a deal.
Yeah. Well, as of right now, it might not be that big of a deal. They have a tantrum and then it goes, away maybe in 5-10 minutes, depending on your child.
Mm-hmm.
But they're going
or not,
right? Or they might just still lay there until they get what they want because they've learned this is how that works.
Right.
But then, later on in their job, they might want a promotion or something like that, and they might just not get that. And then they might think, okay, well, if I just don't show up for work, then my employer is going to see, oh, I really need you, and so I really need to give you what you want. Well, that's not how that works. They're going to replace you, and you're going to be out of a job, and you're going to have very serious consequences compared to what's happening today with a tantrum. So, yes, as of right now today... there is not such a big consequence because it's only those couple minutes that you're dealing with it. But yes, it will have a consequence in the future that is a lot more impactful on their life than what you're thinking today. Is not a big deal.
And it will have an impact on your intimate partner relationships
Yes.
as well.
Yes.
So we're talking about work, we're talking about college,
Mm-hmm.
but we're also talking about how does that impact your ability to
Build relationships.
build relationship and maintain healthy relationships with
Yes.
someone else,
Yes.
right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, because relationships are hard as well. There's going to be difficult times in relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And to be able to hold, healthy, significant relationships, you're going to need to be able to work through difficult times.
Yeah.
And not just, cut off those relationships, because you'll end up lonely
Yeah.
and by yourself if you
Yeah.
do that.
And so you think now, I'm sure any of us can think of adults that we know that struggle to relate in their relationships, to have a healthy interaction with their boyfriends, with their girlfriends, with their spouses, with their children. They just struggle. They can't
Yes.
seem to figure it out, right?
Yes.
This all starts as children. It didn't just pop up as adults.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Yes.
And so we can see the value of really honing in on how do I teach my child to do the and it may be that there's a parent who's listening and thinking, okay, I didn't learn this. I'm struggling to do this. If I'm still struggling to do this, how do I teach my child today not to do what I'm doing if I see myself struggling and can't hold a relationship, right? And have struggles personally on my job, all that kind of stuff. And you better believe that if you're struggling with it now, in those arenas, you're probably also struggling with it in your relationship with your child, and they're picking that up.
Yes.
You may not think they are, but they are picking that up, and it's going to manifest itself over time.
Oh yeah, I mean, they're observing their parents all
All
the
the
time.
time.
They see what they do. You're their role model, if you believe it or not. But they just observe all of that, pick all of that up,
Yeah,
and will replicate that.
yeah,
Just intuitively.
yeah. So, what makes it so difficult? I think one of the things that flies in the face of the idea, oh, children will just outgrow it, right? One of the things that we do have to remember is just developmentally how the brain works and how people work, right? If we understand the way the brain functions and we understand the way people function, we know that when a situation happens, the first way that the brain responds is with the emotional side of the brain. That is just the way that we are wired. That is just the way the brain works. And so if you think about that from a child's perspective, right? Children who are learning to manage everything, just in general, right? They have not gotten to the point where they can integrate that. So when something happens, immediately that emotional side of the brain
Yes.
is going to take over, and they don't know the skills yet. How do I allow logic, which is the other side of the brain, how do I allow logic to mediate my emotion and help me manage my emotion and make sense of my emotion
Correct.
so that my response and my behavior on the other side is appropriate. That's what they're learning. That's what they're not supposed to know how to do yet because they're
Correct.
children, right? And then, which is why we as parents need to teach them. And I think that that's part of what helps us understand, why do kids have tantrums?
Right.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
Sometimes we think, man, that's a bad kid. What's wrong with that kid? Yeah. But what's wrong with that kid?
Yeah, I
Is
mean,
that-
it's just a pure emotion that comes
Yes,
out, right?
yeah.
So, in one way, they're still really able to express all that. Where, with some adults, you might not see that, but they're still feeling all those same emotions.
Yes.
Like you said, they just haven't learned yet how to cope with that in the moment. So, they're just letting it out exactly how
Yeah,
they feel in
how
that
they
moment,
feel it.
no filter.
Yes.
And that's, where the parents do come in and they start helping them regulate that and teaching them, maybe let's take some deep breath. Let's, do some relaxation stuff and then we'll talk about it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think that's hard for parents to really, especially if it happens, you're nodding your head and your eyes are wide open.
Yeah, like when you're sitting in an open space and the child just falls out and starts flailing like a floppy fish, and I don't know what it Jesus. I don't know, like I'm starting to get sweaty and anxious thinking about
It's
it.
so embarrassing. I mean, you feel like everybody around you is judging
Yes.
you and you're failing.
Right. You feel
and-
like
As a
everybody
parent.
around you is judging
well, they
you.
are, right?
They are judging you.
Everybody
Yes.
is, yes.
Oh my word!
Absolutely.
And what do you do? Because you're like, oh my gosh, and not only sometimes do parents kind of not want to deal with that because it's embarrassing, right? And they want it to go away immediately so that, they're not drawing attention to themselves. Sometimes parents just really don't even know, like, what do I do?
Right.
Right? It's not just, this is embarrassing, but it's, what the heck do I do, right? To just kind of shut this down right away.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It just seems unmanageable, uncontrollable in that moment. And you might, even have moments back to when you as a child were in that moment and your parent just came rushing in and, maybe got a beating afterwards or, all the consequences that went with that. So there's a lot of anxiety when that happens for parents.
Yeah, poor parents.
Yes, it's
People
hard.
don't feel sorry for us. People feel sorry for other things. Sometimes they don't feel sorry for us as parents, right?
Yes.
Because our own ability to manage things like that rests in sometimes our own ability to manage our own emotions. So if parents are coming up with anxiety, right, and embarrassment and all the other things that are coming up when their kid throws a tantrum, their ability to manage those stressful emotions really plays into how well they're going to manage their child in that moment, and how well they're going to be able to help their child learn how to manage their emotions at that time and calm down and be able to process through that. And maybe as a child, nobody helped them process through, right?
Yeah.
Like you said, parents rushed in, shut it down. Maybe you got a beating, whatever, right?
Yeah.
But maybe there was no processing. What are you thinking? What are you feeling? What's going on for you right now that's leading to that tantrum? Because the reality is, it's not like kids just throw a tantrum. Something happens.
Right.
There is some trigger. Monique's over there smiling again.
And I guess what the look is, I'm thinking about just different little situations I've seen, and it's really, from the outside looking in, it looks like the child is just, because they're not getting their way.
They're bad.
And I still do it to this day, and it's just a natural reaction. If my daughters are with me and I see it, and they're grown, I just look at them, and they're looking at me with deer eyes. You know what I'm saying?
Your daughters still?
Yes.
They're grown.
I know. Because it's like a trigger. You better not.
That anxiety goes right up there.
Wait. Not only you better not, your kid better not. When you have kids.
Yes. And so,
what do you do when your grandkids do that? Your grandkids do that?
I look at them the same way. You better not. I wish you would. Go ahead, try it. Go right ahead.
See? Oh, God. But listen, that's our typical reaction, though. Right there is our typical reaction. Just shut it down.
Exactly. Let's just end it right
To
there.
end it right there. Right? And sometimes when we think about that, that doesn't necessarily help children to learn how to manage some emotion that's coming at them.
Right.
Right? Because if they're managing the emotion with a tantrum, that means they're really telling us, I don't know how to manage this.
Yeah.
This is my only way of knowing how to manage it, which should tell us we need to do something to help them manage better. Otherwise, all they're going to do is either tantrum in the future or learn to shut it down.
Correct.
If they learn to shut it down, we may feel better because they're not throwing tantrums, but that doesn't mean we've taught them emotional intelligence.
Right. They just stuff it down, and at some point it will come out.
It's
going to
show up someplace. It's
Yeah.
going to show up someplace, right? And so there's this balance to be had, right, between making sure our kids respect us, respect where we are, respect where they are in public, and understand that there's certain things that they do and don't do. There is that to teach them.
Yes.
And then the other side of it is learning them, teaching them to learn to manage their emotions so that they can do that successfully when they get out there on their own,
Yes.
without us intervening and looking at them going, what the heck are you doing? And wait till you get home.
Right.
And they know what the look means because they already know. So now
They're in
we're
trouble.
contributing to their anxiety
Yes.
because they know they're going to get it when they get home.
Absolutely.
Oh my
yes.
gosh.
And then there's a lot of families where it's just not okay to have emotions and to have those outbursts. And so then, you get immediately scared when you feel those emotions coming on, and then that makes it even worse trying to control it, because now you're immediately afraid of even having those emotions, those strong emotions. So then you have to control that anxiety and then the emotions themselves, and it's just this whole big
It becomes this
mountain.
big ball of wax
Yes.
that just, and then down the road as adults to untangle that mess becomes so difficult. Becomes so difficult, because that's after a failed relationship or two or three or four or five that they've got, and they're trying to figure out, okay,
what's going on.
what, right?
So what you're saying is we really need to teach our children young,
Yes,
so
yes,
they're not coming into our office as adults.
yes, yes.
Let's see.
You're just trying to put it out there. Yes, that is what we're saying. That is what we're saying. And sometimes we don't realize that we need to start really young. And you bring up a good point when you say sometimes it seems like when we see these children who are throwing tantrums in the store, it seems to be that they're just not getting what they want, right? But behind that, I'm not getting what I want, and then the tantrum, there's more behind there, right? And what we see in the store didn't just start in the store,
Right.
It starts
right?
at home.
It starts at home,
Yes.
right? And so you better believe there's tantrums at home around not getting what they want,
Right.
and they learn mom and dad either give in, and they
Correct.
learn that the tantrum will work,
Yes.
and that'll get me what I want. So of course they do it when they get outside.
Oh yeah, it's a learned behavior.
It's
Absolutely.
a learned behavior, yeah,
Yes.
right? And so at home is where we teach children, what do you do when you don't get what you want? Well, you kind of talk it through with them, right? Because naturally, like we said, the way the brain works, emotion comes up first. It just does, right? And children, as babies, learn to cry for everything that they want.
Yes.
That's how they communicate.
Right.
And so it's a whole just continuum of stages where children learn how to communicate better about what they feel and what they need and what they want. And if we're not diligent and really understanding how to do that, then that's when it becomes
Yeah,
problematic.
Absolutely. And they have to learn that delayed gratification as well, because like you said, as babies, yes, they cry because they need to survive, and we bring them everything that they need. But as they get older, yeah, you can wait for a minute until you get your food or your drink, and they need to learn that because it's not natural to them. So we need to do that in little steps and teach them that it's okay to be thirsty for a moment. It's okay to be hungry, and it's okay that you don't like that. That's fine to feel all those emotions. But we're not going to have a tantrum about that and learn to sit in that uncomfortable feeling for just a moment.
And it's okay not to get what you want.
Yeah.
To hear the no
Yeah.
and deal with the no. Yeah. So you have a baby.
Yes.
And so you're going through that right now.
Oh, yes. If things don't happen right away, he is mad. And I will say, my husband, his dad, is a lot better about just letting him sit there for a moment. He's like, he's fine, it's good, he can wait for a moment. I'm more the one that, gets stressed out. I'm like, I know exactly what he wants. I know he'll stop if I give it to him. And so, I have to rein myself in and be like, it's okay. Like, he's not going to die if he just has a couple moments of being uncomfortable.
Yeah, and there is that.
Yeah.
There is that. Not wanting to hear your baby cry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very real
hard.
thing.
You want them to be happy. You want to be a
happy.
good mother. There's a lot of expectations around you as a parent. Yes.
Yep. See how easy it is for parents to fall into the trap?
Oh, yeah.
And we don't really know that we're doing that, and that there are things that are attached to everything that we do, right? But we'll talk about that more when we come back. We're going to take a break. See you in a minute on the Dr. Sonja Sutherland Show. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Dr. Sonja Sutherland Show. We are talking today about how to help children deal with difficult emotions, and by extension, we're also really talking about how to help adults, people, deal with difficult emotions because the principles are the same. We've had some comments come in on Facebook. One of the comments asked about whether or not those principles were the same for when working with autistic children.
Yes.
Yeah.
So with autistic children, it's the same principles. What is different is that in autism, kids become overwhelmed a lot more by the social stimuli that are around them, by noises and all of that stuff. So when there might be a tantrum, like in a restaurant or something like that, it is different because the child might legitimately just be completely overwhelmed by the environment that's going on. So for you to be able to deal with that tantrum, you might need to just take your child out of the situation first, so that they can space. Because all the lights, all the noises, all of that stuff is a lot. And then they're going to be able to calm down, and then you can talk it through with them. But yes, so all the same breathing techniques, any calming techniques are really, really good for them. What also happens a lot in children with autism is that they have a lot of anxiety because they're always, evaluating stuff around them. So everything's a little more intense when it comes to that diagnosis. So you also want to teach children to kind of focus on the outside and not on the inside, because on the inside all those anxious thoughts are running through their head all the time. So one thing that I teach my clients that are living with autism is, focus on the outside. What are 5 things that you can see in this moment? What are 4 things you can smell? What are 3 things that you can touch, and how do they feel? So that, they become a little more focused outside, so they're not evaluating constantly, thinking about their anxious thoughts. And then let's talk about it once we kind of calm down and we're not stuck in what we're having.
And it's quite the balance to maneuver for parents to understand how to do that. Even as you focus from the inside to the outside,
then that might become overwhelming.
That becomes potentially overwhelming as well. And so being able to control your autistic child's environment as much as you can, even when you're out, but creating a plan to be able to control that environment and find a safe space or create a safe space quickly for your child so that you can be able to help them manage through their emotions becomes really, really helpful.
Yes, it does.
So tell us a little bit about the work that you do as an animal-assisted therapist. That is also really helpful in helping kids learn how to manage emotions. So talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So I have a therapy dog that's in my office at all times.
She's the cutest thing. Tell everybody her name.
Her name is Elsa, which all the girls obviously love. And some of them this year for Halloween actually chose to dress up as Princess Elsa because they like, Elsa, the therapy dog, so much. So they just wanted to honor her that way, which I thought was really, really cute.
That's cute.
And, the first thing when they come to see me is they greet Elsa first, and she comes and she wags her tail, and they just, they really come because of her. And
nothing against you.
Oh, no, not at all. But, she's just this cute little fuzzball, and she's a Maltipoo, so she's hyperallergenic, so even, kids that might not be able to have a regular dog, she's good because there won't be no allergies, and she just cuddles up right in their lap and loves them and gives them kisses. And what really a lot of the kids like is to be able to play with her and to have fun in therapy. So instead of this, serious place, it just kind of becomes a place where they can be themselves and they can have some fun. And, we can go on walks and we can talk about stuff while we go on walks. We don't have to sit inside because, a lot of the kids are in school all day long. There's questions all day long. And the last thing that they want to do when they come from school is to sit
some more.
And, they're like, oh, are we going to do worksheets? I'm like, no, we're not going to do worksheets. So, the first thing that we might do is just play with Elsa for a little bit, go outside so that they can relax and just have that place where they feel comfortable and safe. Just like when they're having a tantrum, right? So we just kind of need to relax first so that we can really think about what's going on, what's been difficult. And, then as we come back into the office, we just kind of sit down, and then Elsa usually jumps up on the couch with them and plops right into their lap. And so, they're petting her, and they just kind of start, talking about stuff naturally instead of me having to ask a whole bunch of questions or anything like that.
So what is it about working with animals? And I know that Elsa is just one of the animals that you work with.
Yes, she's just one of them.
What is it about that creates that connection, that creates that? What is going on there that is so helpful?
Yes. So just the general touch with Elsa will induce oxytocin in your brain. So it's the same bonding process that goes on between a mother and a child. So when you, as a mother and a child, are cuddling, stuff like that, it's oxytocin that's being released in your brain. And there's been done research because people are like, yes, what's actually going on?
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happens with animals. So that chemical is released in your brain, which makes you calm down, which makes you feel safe, trusting, and to open up about difficult stuff. And that just happens naturally with having really any animal in the office that you trust through just a touching, safe touch with them.
Yeah, and that's helpful because it explains why folks who love dogs and cats so much and just really want to have, and the connection that's there, it explains why that connection is so important, why it's so healing. My younger daughter has a dog. I am not a dog person. Let me just put that out there at the very beginning. But we got a dog when she got sick. And I gave in because I knew that dogs and animals in general really had healing quality, that connection, right? And I am telling you, 5 years later, 4 years later, 5 years later, whatever it is, that dog, oh my gosh. She and that dog are so connected, and she tells me all the time, I need this dog. I need Daisy.
Oh, absolutely, and it's legitimate. It's not just something that they come up with. It's legitimate. There's been a lot of research on it, and the nice thing about that relationship too is there is no judgment in it. So you can talk about whatever you need to talk about, and they'll just be there and comfort you. They don't try to fix things. They don't try to give you any advice.
We're going to talk about that also.
Any of that stuff.
Yeah.
So they're naturally good listeners, and they provide you with that safe relationship. And they always love you. It doesn't matter what you do. At the end of the day, they'll come back to you and forgive you for anything.
Right.
And they don't have like a time limit either. They'll listen to you for 5 minutes. They'll listen to you for 2 hours. Often with people, it's like, all right, I gotta run. I gotta do the next thing.
You done said this thing over and over like 10 times. Stop it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You get impatient and you're like, okay, I think this is enough now. We don't need to talk about this anymore. Well, when in reality, maybe you really do need to talk about it more.
Yeah.
And so the animal will just give you that for as long as you need it, which is really nice to have that.
And that's why it's so helpful for just a range of diagnoses, medical issues, autism, depression, anxiety, schizophrenia. There's research out there that animals are helpful even for folks who are struggling with schizophrenia, just general behavioral issues. This is just the connection with animals just is really healing even across all of those different types of and so you also work with horses.
Yes, I do. I also work with horses. I have 2 horses myself, and I've been riding since I've been 9 years old, so they're just my go-to really. And it's really fun with horses because it's a little different when you work with horses. They're a lot bigger. So we do have miniature horses. They're smaller. They're about dog size, like a big, dogo or something. But we have, the regular size ones, and they're like 1,200 pounds. So when you think about that, when you stand in a ring with that big of an animal, it's very impressive. And you start thinking about, how am I going to behave towards that animal so that I am safe? So often when there's kids that, are very oppositional or defined with their parents, what I'll use is like a big impressive horse, because they're going to think about, am I going to have a tantrum, or they might even be scared when the horse comes to them. And so it's a very different dynamic where there is respect, and what does it mean for you. But just in general, they can really read your emotions really well, and they are very honest. They won't tolerate you being fake because they know what you're doing.
I
Only
love
we
that.
could teach people to do that.
Yes.
Really?
Yes. Well, and it's so helpful to have that as a therapist, because you only know what your clients tell you. You can't look into them.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But with horses, because they're prey animals, they're very sensitive to how everything around them feels.
Mm-hmm.
So they can tell when you're feeling anxious. They can tell when you're feeling sad or angry, any of those things, and they react in a way that keeps them safe towards that. So when you're feeling any of those strong emotions, they will not come to you because it's unsafe for them. They have to keep themselves safe from it.
Right.
Because if you're feeling anxious, sad, or angry, they truly, legitimately think that there's something dangerous out there. Because they don't know that you're just experiencing that. So if, you're standing there and you're telling your therapist, well, no, I'm good, I had a great week, but that horse is just out there and won't come.
Then you know.
I'm like, I know that there's something going on because the horse is telling me what's really going on.
Right.
And then eventually when they start processing stuff, they're starting to relax and regulate their emotions, and then the horse will come and join us. And because it's now a safe place for the horse to come.
I imagine that's very rewarding or therapeutic for the person to experience.
Yes.
Yeah.
That as they begin to process, the closeness increases.
Yes, that emotional relationship increases. Yeah.
It's interesting. We'll talk more about it when we come back from the break. But I definitely want to go to your question, whatever that was going to be. And a couple other things as well. We'll be right back with the Dr. Sonja Sutherland Show.
Do you want peace in your family relationships instead of conflict? Do you want a safe, loving marriage instead of one that is failing? Are you troubled about what's happening with your children and need help for them? At Legacy Changers Counseling Centers, the goal is to strengthen individuals and families with cutting-edge emotional and mental health interventions. The exceptionally trained counselors at Legacy provide the specialized guidance you need in a safe environment of belonging so that you can make the life changes you and your loved ones need. Get real help for your emotional and relationship needs. Call today at 404-334-7575. That's 404-334-7575. You can also find us on the web at legacychangerscounseling.com. Call now and transform your life today. 404-334-7575 or legacychangerscounseling.com.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dr. Sonja Sutherland Show. We're here with Annika Fairbairn, who is a licensed associate professional counselor and animal assisted therapist. And I'm going to reach over and turn down something because I'm echoing. Okay, I think I got it. All right, so some more questions have come in. You had a question though when we were going to the break.
The question I had was in regarding to animals. Are all animals just as sensitive as horses when it comes to emotional?
Yeah, most of them are. They will all respond differently. So where horses will go away from all of those emotions and then come in when people relax, dogs respond differently to that. So with Elsa in my regular office, when somebody's anxious or sad, she will go towards that. And she'll try to comfort. When somebody feels angry, she goes away from that. She'll go into her kennel, she'll sit with me. Or if they're so angry that she feels like she needs to protect herself, she might even growl at them. So she responds differently to that. So yes, they're all very sensitive to it, but they read it different.
Okay.
For sure. Or, if clients are so depressed and sad that it's overwhelming to her as well, I've had it where she just lays flat out on the floor and doesn't move for the whole session. And then I'm like, okay, it's real today. It's difficult. So, and then even my clients will be like, wow, like what's up with Elsa today? And I'll be like, well, what do you think, what's going on with her? And then some of them are like, well, I look like that when I'm really overwhelmed and I just want to lay in bed and sleep all day. And I've kind of felt that way. So, yeah.
That's so amazing and helpful.
Yeah. It really is.
Wow.
So, Annika, what age range are you talking about with children? Is it just little ones or teenagers?
No, I mean, it's really all, I personally, the youngest one that I see in my office, she's 5. And then, I see them all the way through to, 17 or then even young adults I see too. And they all like having Elsa in there too. They all appreciate having animals around because oftentimes they've just started creating relationships as younger kids. and then they just grow up with having those relationships. So when they find me, they're like, oh, I saw that you have a dog, and I have a dog now too. And so they feel like they can already connect. And they've also done research on, people that have dogs and animals seem to be more trustworthy. So then that kind of helps in that therapeutic relationship too, where they feel like, oh, she has a good relationship with her dog, so that means that relationally I might be able to connect with her as well. Yeah.
That's interesting. So people who have dogs and cats and have good relationships with their animals are probably more trustworthy.
Yes, they've done a lot of research on that, where people, like, randomly on the street, they meet them and they might ask them, do you have a couple of bucks for me because I need to make a phone call or I need to get some gas. And when they had a dog, especially often like a Labrador or something like that, they would be more likely to do something for them than if you were just a random person with no animal.
That is
along.
so cute. Look at David with his dog. I'm sorry, y'all. Our engineer just showed us his picture with him and his dog chilling.
Yes.
Okay, so that means, so if you're in a relationship or you're looking for a relationship, look for somebody with a dog that seems to have a good relationship with their dog. And more than likely, they're a very relational person.
Yes.
And probably a good relationship, not just has a dog.
Right.
Or
has
an
a relationship
animal
with a
has
dog.
a good
Yes.
relationship.
Yes.
What
Yes.
about a cat or something like that? I don't like cats too tough. They're kind of creepy.
Oh, Monique.
Just saying.
And cat lovers out there are kind of like
sorry.
claws are coming out at you right
I
now.
love dogs. I love horses.
Oh my word.
Are cats the same? Like, their temperament is very different than a dog.
Yes, they are.
They will cut you up.
So it's different. I mean, so I personally don't have like a therapy cat because they do more of their own stuff. So they might not come to you when you're feeling sad and lonely because they just kind of determine that stuff more on their own because, out in the wild, they would be the ones that are like hunting and stuff like that. And they don't live in a pack. They're more independent. So they do relate differently. So I have not tried to have a cat myself. So I actually don't know too much about how they relate. I'd have to read up on that. But it's definitely different than the horses or the dogs.
So if you're depressed, get a dog, don't get a cat.
Yes.
Well,
it's true.
if
I mean,
yeah.
if you think about it,
if you're looking for,
Yes.
if depression is really heavy and anxiety is really heavy, and you're looking for intervention in addition to counseling, and you're thinking about an animal, well then it
you
seems
want to
like
get
you want to
something
get
that comes to you
Right.
when you're
Yeah.
feeling
Right.
that way.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And
Yeah.
that's why they do a lot of dogs with post-traumatic stress, that they train for that.
Right.
So that they're there and can help you regulate.
Yeah.
Because a cat might just not be there for you. They might
and
just
that
go.
make you feel worse.
Yes,
Yeah.
when you're like, oh, come here, and then they're like, nope, I am off doing something else. It's like, oh, not even my cat wants to be with me right now.
You go down the
Right.
hole.
Absolutely.
Well, that would be interesting
Yes.
to really do the research on cats and really see what is out there. Right, we're just using anecdotal right now, but
Right.
there's probably some research out there that will inform us a whole lot more around cats.
Yeah.
That's interesting. That's interesting. But I'll be leaning towards a dog if I
Yeah.
kind of go that way. So, can people have their own dogs trained to be therapeutic for them?
Yes, definitely, they can. There is some different trainings out there that they can do, obviously specifically for more dogs or horses. And usually it starts with, general obedience training so that you have control over them. But then they go through what is called a canine good citizen, where the dog really shows that they are a good citizen and they will be helpful and they won't get scared when there's loud noises. They will be there and you can pet them, you can be out in the community with them and they will, behave and be by your side. Because that's important qualities, because there's some dog breeds that are not good for that, where, you go out with them and they might not appreciate a lot of strangers and stuff like that. So let's go back to, kind of the autistic population, where it's helpful to have a dog because you can have that calming touch and all of that. You want a dog that's able to stay calm
Right.
when there's a lot of stuff going on around you.
Yeah.
So you want to be mindful in what kind of dog breed you choose and then put through that training. Because there is, some breeds that get overwhelmed themselves, or they just really don't like a lot of random people around them because they're very protective.
Right.
So then at that point it becomes more about you controlling the dog than the dog being helpful
Right.
and
To you.
therapeutic to you.
Sure.
Yes. So you want to
Sure.
be mindful
Yeah.
of that.
Yeah, that's interesting. So then we started this whole conversation around emotional intelligence, teaching children to manage difficult emotions. And we brought in the conversation around animals
Yes.
because animals can do that
Yes.
and are very helpful for teaching people
Yes.
how to manage difficult emotions, or at least helping create safe space that allows
Where you
them to
can do that.
be able to do that, right? And so that's really helpful. We talked about just the fact that in learning to manage difficult emotions, we are also learning to teach our brains how to function effectively, how to have the left and right brain, the emotional and the logical brain, interact in a way that is complementary. Because we know that emotions are triggered first in
Correct.
any situation, and the ability for our logical brain then to be interconnected with that in a healthy way to manage those emotions and then lead to a behavior that is actually helpful within society, within the whole 9 yards, right? And so as we think about the idea of teaching children, what are 2 or 3 important considerations you think folks should know about when thinking about
Sure.
teaching children to manage
So
emotions?
the first thing that I like to share with parents is you want to have connection before correction. So like you're saying, the emotional side comes in first, and if you're trying to go to correction immediately then and there, it's not going to work because that emotional brain is the only one that's functioning at that point.
Right.
So yes, your child might be throwing a tantrum, so then instead of correcting that tantrum, the first thing you're going to do is, I see that you're upset, I see that you're mad.
Offer
because-
empathy.
Offer empathy because you're not getting ABC what you want, and I'm sorry, that you're feeling that way right now.
And continue, but I want to interject here
Yes.
because I can hear parents thinking, okay, but that just is so simplistic. Why would I cater to
Sure.
what they're doing,
Sure.
right?
Right.
Remember, in young children, what we're doing is trying to teach them. We're trying to create space
Right.
to teach them something. And in saying what you see as a parent going on, it helps them to be able to
Right.
process in
Process
their
it.
minds
Yes.
what's going on for me, right?
Right.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. So then after you attend into that emotional side and they're able to, calm down because they realize that, yes, I'm, acting that way, but I'm still loved. Like, I still love you even though, you're acting that way right now. Then once that emotional side comes down, you can go into correction and you can be like, you're not getting that candy right now because, we have a lot of stuff at home and we don't need that extra thing. Or you can tell them, nobody's getting anything of that. Like, that was not the deal. And even better with that, before you go out into a situation where a tantrum might happen, you can already let them know, when we go there and you want something, we're not going to do that. So they already know ahead of time what is going to happen. And so then when you are in that moment where that tantrum is happening, you can refer back to that and be like, remember what we said at home.
Right.
If we come here and you're with me, you're not going to get anything. And that was the rule. And that was the deal, and we're sticking with that,
Right.
so that they have that consistency.
Right.
Right.
And part of that too is also helping children verbalize the understanding for them. You might feel like this is just too intense and you're not going to be able to handle it,
Yeah.
and hence you're going to, but you'll see you will be able to
Yes.
handle not getting this
Yes.
or
Right.
not getting, and put it out there and talk about that,
Right.
Yeah.
right? So that
Right.
they kind of have an understanding of
Yeah.
the feeling that actually might show up,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
I might feel,
Angry that
Angry,
I don't get what I
anxious.
want.
Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. So just being able to have that conversation.
Right.
This is how you might feel, but don't feel like, it's not that you won't be able to handle the emotion.
Yes.
You will be able to. And here's how I
will be
know.
okay.
And it's going to be okay. And so even if when they get out there, they still kind of, because remember, that logical brain is still developing.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Yes,
somebody's like,
Monique.
yeah,
We're laughing at
right.
I haven't said anything. I said I was going to behave on this topic.
Wait. Not for nothing.
Yeah.
You say that about every time.
I can't help myself, something gets triggered. No, but I was listening to what you were saying, and it reminds me of Grandma before we would go into before we would go in the store. She would have that conversation. We're not going to do this. Like, we're not gonna. When we go in, we're going in for something very specific.
Yes.
Right.
We're not getting this. So I'm just giving you warning in up front. And I remember going into the stores. I couldn't touch anything.
Yes.
I couldn't even pretend to look that way.
Yeah.
What did I tell you? So how do you handle with a child going in after having that conversation prior to getting there, and you're in there and the child touches it and still throws a tantrum? Because I feel like you do have a lot of parents that are having this conversation beforehand.
Sure.
But then the child still.
Yes. So then the problem becomes if you don't lay out what the consequence is going to be if that does happen.
Right.
So often we think about, we don't want you to do A, B, C, and D. But then what happens if you do? What is the 1, 2, 3? And then what happens after we say 3, right?
Right.
And I've had conversations with parents where they're like, well, I really don't know what happens after 3. We just go to 2.5, 2 3/4.
Right.
Therein lies the problems, right there. And we're going to let you give that solution. When we come back from the break, we just have to take a quick air break, and we'll be right back with the Dr. Sonja Sutherland Show. Talking about what happens after 1, 2, 3,
yes,
right?
yes.
And parents that haven't really figured out what actually happens, and that being the problem. So, what should they do?
So that solution can be individual to what you think is a good consequence that works for your child. So some kids might respond better to positive reinforcement, and so then you can say, okay, if you can, keep your hands to yourself and not ask for anything and behave well, then when we get back home, you might get 20 minutes with mom, where mom only focuses on you, and we color together, or we do something that the child really likes. Other children might respond better to negative reinforcement, where there's something being taken away if you don't behave the way we said you were going to behave. So then the consequence might be, okay, if you can't do what you said you do, then on the next trip you're not going to be coming with me, or we're going to take away something that you were looking forward to in the week. The important thing with the consequences and the rewards is that the child knows about those before going into the situation, so that it is predictable. You can't, when they're in that tantrum, then out of a sudden say, oh, now you're going to lose your phone for like a week, because in that moment you're also emotional, and so you're going to have a consequence that makes sense to you, that might not be appropriate for that moment. Often, especially with younger kids, they don't think like a week in advance. So that phone being taken away for a week, or not being able to ride their bike for a week, is completely inappropriate for what's going on in that moment. So you want to think about, where are they developmentally, what is an appropriate natural consequence, maybe even, and do they respond better to them being given something or something being taken away? Because everybody is individual and nobody responds to the same thing.
Right. Because I was going to say that you have to tailor it towards the child.
Yes.
Every child is different.
Yes.
And so you can't give the same corrective action to the same child.
Yes. Even within the family, the different
Yeah.
kids will need to have different consequences and rewards.
And you're a couple of points. One, the latter, thinking about it ahead of time and not just doing it on the fly.
Yes.
When you're emotional, the other piece of it as well is they're already going to be emotional.
Right.
And you're adding on, at that point now you're going to be adding on to that trigger for them, because now they're emotional about whatever it is that they can't have.
Right.
Yes.
And now they're going to lose something else.
Yes.
Right.
And so that just adds on to it. The other piece is, as you talked about choices between positive or negative reinforcement, and you described positive reinforcement, for example, as you will be able to have 20 minutes of mommy and me time to do whatever. And on the negative side, you may lose this. It's important to remember we don't want to take ourselves away, right? So the comparable negative reinforcement is not that I won't spend time with you.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
So just I want folks to be really clear that you don't want to withdraw yourself as a corrective consequence. But giving more of yourself or adding more can be a good positive reinforcement. All right? So just wanted to make sure that folks kind of understood on the other side.
Yes, I appreciate the
Don't
clarification.
pull yourself
That's
away.
not going to be a consequence
Yes.
that you're not spending time with your child. Yes, because that would be detrimental.
Yes,
Right.
very
to your
much
child.
so.
Absolutely, yes.
Very much so. The other thing is, we've talked a lot about managing emotions in the tantrum sense. Let's shift a little bit because sometimes we have children who dysregulate and we don't know why, and it's not because they didn't get what they wanted. Right? So we have children who may dysregulate out of fear, right? Or they may dysregulate out of sadness, right? Or frustration, not relating to not getting something that they want, but for something else going on in their world, right? And it could be something as simple as, and I say simple, but it wouldn't be simple for them, a really mean teacher,
Oh, yes.
right?
Yeah.
Or, things like that, that really just, and so helping them be able to manage emotions where those types of dysregulation occurs and we just don't know, we can't figure out, well, what is it, why my child is dysregulated. It becomes really important for us to remember what you said about not demanding that they be logical and stop crying or calm down without being able to help them through a process of figuring out, well, what is happening for you? What's underneath this emotional dysregulation, right? What was the thing that triggered you at the very beginning, right? And so it starts with the process of, I see that you're crying and something is wrong, or I see that you're frustrated and something is wrong, and you can't even talk about it, right? And get them to be able to begin to
Become aware of that.
become aware of that.
Yes, absolutely.
I was thinking, this helped me understand children, because I don't necessarily see children in my practice. But anytime I kept seeing bad behaviors, I would kind of cringe and I would be like, why are they doing that? And someone said to me one time, any attention from the parent is
good attention for them. They don't care how they get it.
They don't when they're responding in such a negative way, what is it that they're not getting? Because I always feel like at the end of the day, if someone is not getting something, they're going to respond and react.
Yes.
In whatever way they know how to emotionally intelligently just kind of set it up for themselves. So when we see this child out there responding, right, what can a parent do to stop themselves, especially if they brought their children up the way that I did, instead of reacting and saying, okay, this child obviously needs something, right?
Yes.
What can they do for their children?
So if you don't, want the negative behavior, which I'm hearing you talk about, and you say, and it's true, they like attention, right? So if they learn that they can get it by acting out, and parents are responding to that, and often there's a lot of attention that's given once kids act out that way, the only way to really extinct that behavior is to withdraw all attention from that, which is really hard because what will happen is the behavior will get worse first. Because now what worked previously is not working anymore. So they'll be more angry, they might start throwing stuff because they've learned this works. And so I'm going to do everything in my power to still get that. And that often breaks parents. And then, they respond again and they just reinforce it. So the kid's like, yes, okay, so if I do this, then I still get my attention. So once you get to that point, it's really important to not draw any attention to that.
To that behavior.
And then once they calm down and relax, that's then when you give attention. You say, oh, I really like how you're calming down now and how you're sitting there quietly. And so you reinforce that by really overly paying attention to that now. So then they learn, oh, this is how I get what I want and what I need. Yeah.
Right.
Because
It's very
we're seeing
important.
it in school as well.
Yeah.
Even with teenagers, they're acting out in classes.
Oh,
and
yeah.
so the teacher is trying to regulate her room, you know, when you've got 20 kids in there and you've got one or two.
Only 20?
I don't know.
Yeah, like 30.
Again,
Yeah.
I don't go in the school system and work with I guess it depends on the county
Probably.
as well.
Yeah.
So the teachers are experiencing this as well with the children. And so now the parents are being called up. I'm going to need you to come and get Johnny because Johnny is cutting up in class.
Right.
Do you ever in your practice deal with both the parent and the child together and teaching them both how to respond?
Oh,
to
yes.
one another?
Yes, there is plenty of sessions where the child, you know, and the parent is there because most of the time or a lot of the time what's going on with the child, what the child's having difficulty with, comes from the relationship with the parent because it's just hard. And yes, so, you know, when they get called in for whatever it is, I'll, you know, first spend time with the child so that I can build that relationship. But then as we talk about, you know, what's going on, what are some difficulties, yes, the parent comes back in, and one of the first things that often we work on is, you know, how do we even communicate? How do we learn that I feel heard by my parent? How do I learn that I feel heard by my child? Because there's, you know, a lot of the emotions that start where there is anger, there's anxiety, and I feel this way, but I'm not telling you because some kids feel like they're burdening their parents and they don't want to do that. Some kids don't feel safe to do that. Some feel like, oh, you're just going to say, oh, it's not such a big deal, and, you know, just throw it over their shoulder and you'll be fine. It's okay because I've been through a lot myself too and I'm okay too. So there's
And that's very common.
Yes.
That's very common.
Yes.
Yeah, and so in situations like that, what potentially has happened is you have parents who haven't really learned how to deal with difficult emotions either.
Right.
They've learned to shut it down.
Yeah.
And they've you know,
They
battled
had to.
through.
Yeah.
They had to. They battled through.
Right.
Right? And so they're teaching their children to battle through.
Yes.
And so again, there's a balance, right, to be had. Because we always do want to teach our children to battle through. We want to build strong, resilient
Oh,
children.
Yes. Yes.
Right? We don't want to coddle children.
Right.
Right? And
Right.
create weak.
Yes.
Right.
I hate that word. It's probably not a word I want to use, but you understand what I'm saying, right? And so there is a balance to creating a situation where children are empowered and feel strong and can battle through situations, while we also, on the other side, teach them how to show emotion, how empathy feels, receiving that from someone,
Yeah.
which validates the fact that I have this emotion.
Yes.
And there's nothing wrong with me for having the emotion. It's just what I do with the emotion.
Correct.
That's the issue that's at stake
Yes.
here, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a balance that parents really want to be able to create.
Yes.
We're not saying that parents should coddle their children,
Oh, no.
right? And should coddle their emotion. That
Yeah.
We're not saying that. We're saying that parents should learn to help them manage any emotion that comes through, and that non-judgmental acceptance that you talk about, that dogs and horses and animals are able to provide, meaning any emotion I have, they're not going to judge me for the emotion.
Correct.
They're just going to help me deal with the emotion in some way,
Yes.
shape, or form.
Yes.
And that's what we're trying to help parents learn to do as well. Many of us who may not have gotten that type
Yeah.
of reinforcement
Right.
from our parents,
Right.
learning how to say, this is my emotion. Okay, there's nothing wrong with the emotion. It's an emotion.
Right.
So let's talk about it. What's the
Yes,
root of that?
yes.
And how do you want to deal with the emotion?
Yeah.
That may not be something that a lot of folks have really,
Oh, no, it's very hard.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
very difficult.
And, you know, I just had a situation actually with one of my clients where that particular client, he's younger, and he can be very passive in how he deals with some of the horses because he's very gentle and he wants, you know, to be loved and all those things, which, you know, works with very gentle horses. But as we know, not all horses and not all people are gentle, in life.
Mhm.
So I started pairing him up with a horse that will push boundaries and that will show you disrespect if you don't stand up for yourself. And he was, you know, brushing the horse and trying to clean the horse's feet. And the horse kept nudging him. And so in the horse world, it's about who moves who. So if I can move your feet, then I am in charge. And so this is what this pony started doing. It kept nudging him, and he kept moving away. So that was telling the pony, okay, so I am in charge. And I kept, pointing that out to my client. I'm like, it keeps moving you, it keeps moving you. It is necessary that you respond, because otherwise the horse will think it's in charge. He kept stepping away, avoiding it, being passive about it. And so eventually the horse tried to nip him. And he became so scared, he started crying. He didn't want to work with the horse anymore. And so I went in there and we processed the emotion, and we said, yes, this was scary, and you're feeling anxious right now, and you're feeling overwhelmed. But it's important that we don't now avoid this horse, but that we stay with the situation and keep working on it. And this happened at the end of the session. So then a week later he came back, and he was super anxious. He had trouble putting the halter on. He had trouble, just even clipping the lead rope in and everything. So before we could work on it, we had to step away, and we had to talk about situations where before it was good for him to face his fear. Where he was like, yeah, I was scared of these things, but then I did it, and I actually had fun, and there was a lot of positive stuff that came back from it. And, sometimes then I'll share about myself too, And I told him, I'm like, I've fallen off horses myself, and it's scary to get back on, but what if I never went back on that horse?
Right.
How much would I have missed? And he's like, you know what, you're right. So we went back to the pony, and he finally did what I shared with him you need to do. You need to push that pony back, and you need to, show that it can't just disrespect you like that. And he did, and that pony stood, and it didn't even look at him anymore. It picked up the feet, and he was able to do everything. And he was so proud of himself. And I'm like, how are you feeling now? And he's like, I am just proud. I'm happy.
And
that I got to do
translate
this.
that into the real world.
Yes. So
Right.
and that's what we always do.
Yeah.
So we talked about, how there might be people in your life that bully you and that push you around
Right.
like that, and how by avoiding that, they will just, push you even more and make you scared. And you need to stand up for yourself. And I always ask him, like, what do you take away from this? And he's like, I need to stand up for myself, and I need to give hard situations a second chance so that I can deal with them.
Yeah.
Yes.
Excellent.
We have to remember that, the way we're wired is that we're emotional creatures. What happens when we go through things, the first thing that takes over is our emotions, and that rational side of us don't kick in until after the fact. So that's one important thing to remember, that we are emotional beings, and emotions start before the rational.
Yes.
So yeah.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So what's something else then, in addition to what you were just sharing, that you feel like folks need to take away? And well, this may not be what you're going to come up with, but something else that just popped into my head. One of the things I think too, that parents can take away from that, sometimes what parents want to do is comfort a child.
Oh, yes.
And pull away or avoid talking about stressful situations.
Right.
And innocently, right, thinking that this is I just want to comfort my kid and make sure they feel safe, and so don't think about that anymore. That's not happening anymore. Let's say they get lost in the grocery store, right? And they get found, and oh, don't worry, everything is okay, and they rub the back and just kind of hug them and trying to make them feel okay, and just kind of don't think about it anymore. Mommy's right here, daddy's right here, everything's going to be fine. And that's all great. But that's traumatic for a child.
Yes.
Right.
Oh, yes.
And they need space to actually talk about what
Right.
that was, right?
Yes.
Again, helping children learn how to think through and manage through emotions so that at the back end, they can come up with behaviors that are helpful for them, right? And so being able to help them kind of process through. It must have been really scary for you to turn around and not see mommy anymore, or not
Right.
see daddy anymore, right? And there must have been a bunch of people around you. That must have been hard to not know what to do and not know where to go.
Oh, yeah.
And let them help them tell their story and work through that trauma. Because otherwise, if we just get stuffed down,
Oh,
it's just going to come up
It
someplace
is,
else
yes.
in a way that, and then you won't know. You won't be able to put two and two together and figure out, oh, well,
where does this come
Where
from?
is this coming from? Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. And the thing too with kids, we talk about talking about stuff. Often kids, when they're younger, they don't necessarily talk about stuff. They play it out. So, when something happens, like with a grocery store, for example, now that they're home with their Legos or Duplo or their Barbies, they might play where, Barbie gets lost and then it gets found again. And so, often parents are confused and frustrated. They're like, oh, my child just doesn't want to talk about it. Well, that's okay, because that's not their way of communicating at that point. They might just play. And so if you just kind of join them in their play and play together with them, that will help them process that as well. And let them play it over and over and over until they just stop. And when you know that they naturally stop, then they're good and they're finished with it. Yes.
Excellent. And of course, that means that we've got to pay attention and be intentional about how we engage with children. Because if we're not paying attention to what they're doing, then you won't notice that they're playing Barbie is lost over and over again. And we won't have a clue of what's going on in their minds around that kind of thing. Excellent. We'll be back in a minute and continue with the Dr. Sonja Sutherland Show.
Do you want peace in your family relationships instead of conflict? Do you want a safe, loving marriage instead of one that is failing? Are you troubled about what's happening with your children and need help for them? At Legacy Changers Counseling Centers, the goal is to strengthen individuals and families with cutting-edge emotional and mental health interventions. The exceptionally trained counselors at Legacy provide the specialized guidance you need in a safe environment of belonging so that you can make the life changes you and your loved ones need. Get real help for your emotional and relationship needs. Call today at 404-334-7575. That's 404-334-7575. You can also find us on the web at legacychangerscounseling.com. Call now and transform your life today. 404-334-7575 or legacychangerscounseling.com.
Welcome back to the Dr. Sonja Sutherland Show. We have been talking about helping children manage difficult emotions, and we've been talking about animal-assisted therapy and how helpful that can be. And we've talked about how parents can think about and understand how the brain works in children and understand why tantrums or emotional dysregulation can pop up so suddenly in children, whether we feel it's a tantrum because it's not getting something they want, or it's something else, some traumatic situation, some difficult situation that a child has experienced and now is emotionally dysregulated because of that. And so we've covered a lot of ground, and I'm wanting to just kind of think through if there is anything else that we should think through. One of the things that comes through my mind is we've talked about how parents can do things better. And the other thing is we're going to make mistakes as parents. And so when we make a mistake, when there's a rupture, it can be repaired. It can be repaired. And we are just human. And when we say the wrong thing, when we do the wrong thing, it's okay to kind of talk through the fact that we said the wrong thing or we did the wrong thing. That in and of itself and that engagement with your child is a learning space as well. Right? A really wonderful learning space because it teaches them that, okay, so if I make a mistake, then I'm not the worst person in the world because
I don't have to be perfect.
I don't have to be perfect, right? Because mom and dad are able to say to me, when they do something wrong, this is how they're thinking about it. So we're modeling several different things at the same time when we're able to think about the fact that we're human and we make mistakes and we can
talk about it. And even apologize to your children because you expect them to apologize to you when you're not being treated well. So
but I'm the adult.
I was going to say that's going to be hard for some people to digest.
Yes, well, because your parents may have treated you that way too. Like I'm the adult, and I get to make the decisions. But it's really important because you're their role model. So if you're able to say, yes, I've made a mistake, and I'm sorry that I've hurt you in this or that way, then kids are really going to take that in because you're their parent, and it's so huge when you are able to say that.
I'm sorry that I overreacted and yelled. I was angry and I wasn't sure how to deal with it, and before I took a step back to figure that out, I yelled at you. and that wasn't really what I wanted to do. As
Yeah.
simple as that,
Yeah.
as simple as that, says a whole lot and teaches a whole lot to a young person. So when we talk about developmentally, age-wise, then we say we need to start this early,
Yes.
really early,
Yes.
really, really early.
Really, really,
Really,
early.
really. Not 7. 7 is not early.
What's early?
5 is not early.
No, no,
4 is not early.
no.
This starts at 2.
Yes.
Really?
Yeah,
Yes.
as young as 2. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And some people might even say even younger than that.
Yeah, I mean, just
Yeah.
practicing those good habits will go such a long way because they're picking everything up. They're always watching you, and even when you think they don't see what you're doing or they can't tell, they really can.
Yeah,
So yes,
Absolutely.
the earlier the better.
the earlier the better. And so as a parent, if you struggle with being able to step back from your emotions and find yourself in a situation where you would then be constantly apologizing,
Oh yes.
then that is a sign that you probably need to do some of your own work in counseling just to really begin to get a handle on what is that about for me,
Yes.
right? Why am I constantly in a space where I have to potentially apologize
All the time. Yes.
for yelling or for becoming angry or for becoming emotionally dysregulated in an uncontrollable way that then impacts the people around me,
Yeah.
right? What is it that I don't understand about myself, my triggers, my emotions that doesn't allow me to engage in the way that I really want to engage?
Yes.
Right? Because then you're dealing with lots of remorse and guilt
Oh, feeling so guilty.
and
Yes.
shame and all
Yes.
those types of things that are just not where you want to be as a
Yeah.
parent. None of us wants to be there, right? And so if we don't want to perpetuate that in our children, it means that we step back and we do some counseling work and get a handle on all of that and be able to help our kids.
Which is a good role model again, because then later when your child might need counseling, you can say, hey, I did that myself and it was really helpful. So yeah,
Helping them feel safe
Yes.
to go into the
Yes.
counseling room.
and that it's okay. Yeah.
And helping them feel safe with you.
Yes. Yeah.
That'll help
important.
them feel safe with you
Yes.
if you're able to do that. And that's what we want. That's what we want. When we think about as our children grow into middle school years, right, and high school years, if they don't feel safe with you to be able to process through,
Yes.
they're going to go any other place
Right.
than you
To do that. Yes.
to do that. And even the worst places
Yes.
to do that,
Yes.
right? Because sometimes the worst places are the places that will listen first.
Correct. Yeah.
Yes. And that's where we find our young people involved in gangs, involved with predators, and things of that nature. So I think the relationship between the parent and the child is very important.
Yes.
And to be able to come and sit in your room and just kind of have that conversation and what that looks like, especially if you grew up in an era where parents didn't talk to their children.
Right.
Children should be seen
Yes.
and not heard. And you sit over
Go
there
sit
and
in the
do what I
corner.
say and not what I do, and it's hard to
Don't
change.
get in adult conversation.
That's right.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, so coming from that era and trying to relearn as an adult that these are little adults.
They are. They have
Yeah.
all these same emotions. They have all the same stuff. What they just don't have yet is the tools
Yeah.
to deal with it.
And
Yeah.
who's supposed to teach them the tools?
Yeah.
That's right.
Parents. Yes.
And we don't do very well at it sometimes.
Sometimes we don't.
Yeah.
Some people do a good job at it, and some people don't.
I mean, it takes a lot of effort,
It
and everybody's
does.
so busy and so stressed out all the time. So, I get it. It's hard to do even, the smallest thing, but it really pays off
It does.
to do.
It does. It does. And even if you do a relatively good job connecting with your child and helping them, it's always worth it to have the conversation to say, how are we doing?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right? What could we do better? It's important to me that our relationship as parent and child, and not necessarily friend, we're not trying to promote that
No.
you become your child's friend.
Right.
You are your child's role model, parent, mentor, right? The person that teaches them, right? And so it's always worth the conversation. How are we doing? What could we do better
Right.
in our relationship? What would make you feel even safer? Are there areas of things, the spaces where you don't feel like you could really talk? And so even with that, right? It's worth having the conversation. And you don't know what your child will tell you. You may
Yeah.
be surprised. There may be something that comes up that you didn't think would come up, right?
Yes.
So there's that piece of it. And then there's the other piece of it, that if you have done the groundwork intentionally, even if you didn't start at 18 months or 2, right? If you started a little late, okay.
Yeah.
You laid the
Still
foundation.
work on it.
You can still work on it, right? And maybe as they get to middle and high school, there's spaces where they don't really want to talk to you about certain types of things. If you have laid a solid groundwork so that they understand what safe people feel like and what safe relationships feel like, and you've taught them how to manage emotions, more than likely the people that they find to talk to will be people that you would be okay with, more than likely.
Yes.
Right? And so you can rest a little bit knowing that everybody needs input from other people in their lives.
Right.
It's not just going to be us as they continue to grow, but if we've done the right groundwork, then most of the time, not that they won't make mistakes, but most of the time they will find people
Yes.
that are safe.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's absolutely right, because our kids will replicate the relationships that we
Yes.
have in our families.
Absolutely.
So yes, their future boyfriends, girlfriends are going to be a lot, like their parents. And what felt safe with the parents and what felt like love with the parents will be what they look for in their future relationships.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. So, questions from the community. We haven't taken any yet. Do we have one? What we got?
So I feel the question came in. I feel quite low sometimes. Should I talk to a therapist or could I just take some medicine prescribed by my doctor?
Okay. So low is a general word.
Okay.
And so we don't know what low means, right? Low could mean depressed, low could mean anxious, low could mean a lot of different things. But we'll just take it to mean I don't feel well.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I just don't feel well.
general.
Something's
I want it to
wrong.
stop,
And I
whatever
want
it
it to
is.
stop, whatever it is. Yeah. And so the question is, should I see a counselor or can I just take medication? Yeah. That's not a tough one, but it's a tough one.
Yes.
Because there's a balance to be had. I am not the type to promote just taking medication. I would prefer medication to be a secondary
resort. Yeah.
choice, and not a first choice, right? We don't want to put things into our body that don't really belong there.
Correct.
Even though we know that depending on what emotional or mental health concern might be coming up here, that there are brain chemistry concerns that can be related to that, right? And so medication deals with leveling out the brain chemistry towards improved functioning. So that's really the true function of what we call psychotropic medication in counseling. But we also want to make sure that talk therapy, play therapy, animal-assisted therapy, right? Any of those, whether those can be the thing that just really is able to help you manage what you need to manage, right? And so I would definitely start with counseling and talk therapy. I wouldn't start with a prescription medication. I wouldn't start with anything over the counter. I wouldn't do things like, and there are folks who will get mad at me about this, but I wouldn't do things like St. John's wort for depression. There is no FDA approved study, nothing that says that St. John's wort will do across the board for each person that takes it what it's supposed to do, what it says to do. Now, it may do that. We have anecdotal evidence, and so it does that for some, but it's not regulated by the FDA, and so we just don't know. We can't say that, yes, this will work. So I wouldn't necessarily do things like that, but you can do some research on healthy approaches for dealing with mood.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Absolutely. That don't involve medication.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
there's so much in nutrition you can even do
Yes.
to regulate, what you're putting into your body, how your body responds to that, how it processes everything. That will change how you're feeling about yourself a lot.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
just change how you feel in
Exercise.
generally. Exercise.
That's a huge one.
Very much so.
I believe in holistic healing first, exercise, getting those endorphins going.
That's right.
Whether it's yoga and really doing some mindfulness with yourself. I love the nutrition piece. I met with a young lady this weekend who was talking to me about blood types. It was funny. She says, well, what blood type are you? And I told her, and she said, well, your body would do so much better
on this type of
nutritional regimen. And I was like, that's funny you say that, because whenever I follow this, I feel completely different, mentally, physically, emotionally.
Absolutely. Even sugar. You talked about nutrition. Sugar.
Yeah.
Got you up and down, up and down, up and down. Now, not for nothing, I love me a piece of cake. Chocolate cake. Oh my gosh.
You might need it.
Indeed.
Yes.
Indeed.
Yes.
But the reality is, if you're not watching what you eat, your mood is going to go up and down and up and down.
Yeah.
Right? And so, yes, definitely, if you're struggling with mood and you're feeling low, sometimes you want to start with those types of things. The best approach is to go see a counselor and talk about those things, right? Because your counselor will help you kind of assess just the severity of your low mood and what that may be looking like for you right now, especially if you've been struggling with it for a long time. And so it will be helpful if you're able to do your talk therapy and then add in your holistic approaches and see what impact that has on your mood and your functioning, and then talk further about whether more is needed in one area or a different area, things like that. And a therapist can teach you skills that will be very helpful for you in learning to manage mood. So I would start there. And then based on that, your therapist, if you have a good one, will make a recommendation about whether or not medication might be helpful. Right? If you have severe mood, if there are other things, and like I said, it just says low mood, so we don't really know what that means. It could mean any number of things. Your therapist will be able to tell you whether or not it will be wise to go ahead and think about seeing a doctor about medication and whether or not it will be warranted given where you are. And it will be different for different people, just depending, right? And so go and see a counselor, and then from there, you'll be able to kind of know what the best route to take is.
Well, and then, with medication too, there's always side effects.
Yes.
So while you're on medication, you want to be with a counselor who can, give you awareness of what might be side effects and kind of monitor that together with you.
Absolutely. So I hope that was helpful for the person that sent in that question. We are going to go to a break real quick, and we'll be right back with the Dr. Sonja Sutherland Show.
Listening to IBNX, IBNXradio.com.
Everybody, welcome back to the Dr. Sonja Sutherland Show. We have been talking about helping children deal with difficult emotions, and we've covered quite a lot today. And so I just want to make sure that we kind of recap and make sure that we highlight the things most important that we want to make sure that you take away from today's conversation. So Annika, do you want to start, and what do you want to make sure parents take away?
Sure. So I want to make sure that parents take away that you want to have the connection with your child before you have correction, to address that emotional side of their brain, and to then go back to what you planned ahead of time with your child as a consequence. So you want to be predictable with your rules in your house and follow through on them so that your child knows exactly what's going to happen and that you don't have to come up with consequences or rewards in the moment that are going to be emotional for you as well. And you also want those to be in correspondence with their development. Also, I would like to really point out that animals are really just a great companion for your kids that can help them feel less lonely, that can help them feel connected, and just really have a space where there's a safe, other being that loves you no matter what, and that, they can take care of. There's so many lessons to be learned from just having that animal that goes beyond just having that relationship, but taking care of somebody else, remembering to feed them. So there's just so many benefits to really having that you bring into your house. Even though, some parents might think, oh no, another one that we have, and I'm going to be the one taking care of it.
I did think that.
If you just kind of do it together with your child, it will really take that little being on as their own, that they're responsible for, and just give them that love back that they get from that animal, for sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good. Monique, anything you want to add?
I really liked how you talked about, giving the young people some exercises, some coping skills before they're in the therapy room with you. Grounding was one of them.
Yes.
Also, the positive, negative reinforcements. What works well for this child?
Yes.
And really individualizing it to that child. I love the idea of having a pet in the home, a dog.
I'm sorry. We're going to get you a cat for Christmas.
No, please don't. I'm highly allergic.
The grumpy cat, too.
The ones with no hair kind of scare me. I like the idea of having something that the child is responsible for. It kind of helps balance them out.
Yes.
And just really the work that you do with the animals, because I don't think we think about how important connection is, especially when we're in that place of being in a low place or a place where we can't process properly. So I like that.
Yeah. And I think too that two things that I would want parents to remember is just remember how your child's brain functions. Remember how all of our brains function, and understand that when the dysregulation comes first, understand that it's not just that they're trying to be a bad kid.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
Understand that their brain is driving this reaction, right? And it takes us being able to teach them from early on, how do you manage that emotion, that driving from your brain in reaction to some stimulus or some trigger in the world, and learn how to use your logical brain. And that just takes time that parents have to invest. And part of that is helping kids learn to tell their story, helping kids learn to be able to demonstrate and verbalize what's going on for them. Sometimes it will look like just being able to talk through, that must have been so scary for you. How did it feel when you turned around and didn't see mommy there? When did you notice that daddy wasn't around? And then that began to scare you, and just be able to help them kind of talk through that story. And also be aware that sometimes as Annika said, if it doesn't come out verbally at first, it may come out in their play. So pay attention. See what your child is doing. Get on the ground and play with them, so that you kind of know, and let them communicate to you and hear, so that you can hear and see what's going on for them. And then finally, I think it's important for us as parents to remember that we will make mistakes, and we can't get on ourselves too badly or for making the mistakes, right? And we just need to be able to know that we do have the power to repair those ruptures simply by being able to process through ourselves and model through for our children that whole process of acknowledging your feelings, acknowledging your reaction that was linked to your feelings, that wasn't what you wanted, how you would have wanted it to occur, apologizing, things like that. And then I said that was the last one, but then there's one more. The final thing is, of course, get help yourself.
Absolutely.
Get help yourself if you're struggling with that. And there is no shame in struggling with it. There's just no shame. You may feel it, you may feel guilt, you may feel frustration, you may feel whatever myriad of feelings that you are dealing with. But just get the help. We all need help for something.
We do. Nobody is super mommy, nobody is super daddy.
Well, I used to have a
okay.
cape. I used to have a cape.
Let me find out.
But that cape got tattered. It wasn't the same material as Superman. So those are the things that we really want for parents to make sure that they take away, and just continue that intentional engagement with your child at an early age and throughout their formative years. And you will find that they will come back to those things that you've taught them. And then I think the last thing I want to do on the show today is just a tribute to veterans. Today's Veterans Day.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And we love veterans on this show. We talk about them quite a bit. And we wanted to, I have a poem that I want to read to our veterans, but was there something that you wanted to say in particular?
I did. There's a lot going on with our veterans, but there's so much support out there for them, and we just want them to reach out to us if they need it, because they've served us very well and have kept us safe. So we applaud all those out there who have done the work, and Annika even mentioned there's a program for them with their pets.
There is. So it's called Pets for Vets, and what they do is they train therapy dogs, for vets that are dealing with PTSD, that are having difficulty being out in the community, that are, being triggered by, maybe fireworks and stuff, and these dogs are trained towards those triggers that the individual veterans have, and then to come and to kind of nudge them on their hand to ground them that way, or to put a paw on their leg or something like that to just kind of keep them in the moment, and then they're able to pet them and get through the moment and then continue on with their life. So it's really helpful the way they do that.
Are they expensive? I wonder if...
No, there is no, it's all funded. It's a nonprofit, so they do not have to pay for that.
And I wonder if a lot of folks don't know about it.
They don't. So it's a fairly new organization, and they're trying to get the word out there that they're here and that they're training those dogs for it. And what they do too, a lot of their dogs are dogs that have been given up and they don't have a home themselves. So they're pairing those animals that need a home with veterans that need a friend that can just kind of help them and be there for them.
Pets for Vets.
Pets for Vets.
We need to get them on the show.
Yeah.
We're doing a show in a couple 3 weeks or so on addiction and vets, and maybe that'll be a good addition. So let's talk about that. So, all right, thank you for that resource. That's great. And so I just want to read this thought for our veterans as we close out. Just in thank you for the service that you have provided to our country, and for what you have done, the sacrifices that you have made. Dear veterans, those of us who have not served will never fully understand the sacrifices you've made, both in times of peace and of war. We will never fully understand what you were required to do or how you were able to do it. We will never fully understand the depth of your scars. But what we can offer you is this. We see you. We recognize your humanity. And we send you love that is gentle and patient and healing. With blessings and gratitude, we ask that you remember that you are loved, and thank you. And that's a poem by Sydney Sweeney. Thank you, vets. You guys have a great day. See you next week on the Dr. Sonja Sutherland Show. Coming up is the Leadership Blend with Ricardo Rice. Hang on in there and listen in with him as well. Take care. Have a great day.